Today we're going to be making this animation. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process. You can use this tutorial to make your own nostalgic video with pictures from the summer or some vacation that you had. You can pair it to some nice sentimental music like, "Look at this photograph." Really, it's up to you, whatever you'd like. You can follow with me and just learn as you go, or I have all of these tutorial files, all these photographs, the table texture, everything you need for free on my website, learn-blender3d.com. That link will be in the description. Okay, let's get started. Okay, I've got Blender 2.8 open. And I don't have a number pad, so if you don't have a number pad, follow along with me and go to Edit, Preferences, and then Emulate Numpad. I'm going to check that and close this box. So all that does for me is now if I hit 7, I go into my top orthographic view. If I hit 1, I go into the front. If you have a number pad, from now on if I say hit 1 to go into front, you know that's numpad 1. If you're like me and had to change that setting, know that you just hit 1 or 7 or 3 to go into your right view. So I am going to just use my middle mouse wheel to orbit around, and by default this is our scene here. I'm going to click A, which will select everything, hit X for delete, and hit enter to confirm that delete. So just get ourselves a clean slate, and I'm going to hold Control and hit S to save. It's always a good idea to save early and often. And I've got a scene I'm working on here. I'm going to call it just photographs. Okay, hit enter and then enter again. All right, I'm going to hold shift and hit A to add. I'm going to hover over mesh and click on plane. All right, I'm going to hit 7 to go into my top view. I'm going to hit tab to go into edit mode. Hold Control, hit R. That is going to do a loop cut. So if I hover my mouse over here, you see that line up here. I'm going to scroll my middle mouse wheel up once. So now there's 2 cuts. I'm going to left click to say I want that. And I'm going to hit S for scale and X to do it on the X axis. And I'm just going to drag this out until we have a border of about here. And again, I'm going to hold Control, hit R. This time I want to hover my mouse so that I have the line going horizontally across it. I'm going to scroll wheel up to make another cut. Left click to say I want those cuts. S for scale, this time Y because it's going to be on the Y. And so I'm going to compare the border of the sides to the border of the top and bottom until I think they're pretty much even. And so it looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to left click and lock that in. I'm going to save my project. So now we have a nice base going, but I'm going to left click and drag here. And that's going to select those bottom lines. If I hit G, oh, no, it looks like I didn't actually select anything. Let me try this again. Okay, that time it worked. I'm in line select here. You might be in vertices. You're just going to select vertices, lines, or faces. And so actually let's just do the vertices just so we're all on the same page. If I click and drag and get those bottom ones, you can see they're all lit up there. So if I hit G for move and then Y to constrain that movement on the Y axis, I'm just going to bring that down and then left click here. This isn't the exact shape of some of these instant pictures that you might find, but I'm making my own a little bit. You can make it a different shape too if you'd like. So now let's see, I'm going to tab out of edit mode, and this is still selected, and in this right panel here I'm going to go to the material, hit new, and I also want to click this preview just so I can see this preview here. And I'm going to scroll down. We're going to leave it as white. I just want this roughness to go down, which is going to make it shinier, and I maybe won't go completely, but right around the edge there just to make it really shiny. And so we can see how this looks. I'm going to hit Z and go into this look dev, so left click onto look dev, and you might not see much, but if you tilt your camera around And then here you can start seeing I'm getting reflections. In the look dev settings, there's an HDRI, so there's this big texture around us, image essentially, and we're seeing it reflected here. So now I'm going to rotate around. Actually, I'm going to hit 7 to go into my top view. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and let's go up here. I'm going to click on the face select and left click on this face. I'm going to go over to this right panel, scroll up. I'm going to click this little plus arrow to make a new material or a new slot, and then I'm going to click new to make a new material. And since we have this face selected here, I can left click this assign button, and so this area is specifically only going to get this new material we just added. So I'm going to scroll down here, and for this base color to the right, you see a little circle. I'm going to click on that and go to image texture. So what's going to drive how this looks is going to be an image. So I'm going to click on open, and if you navigate to where you have the photos that you want to use, if you download my tutorial files, you'll have all of these images. If you want to use your own, that works also. So I'm just going to, and also I clicked on these little icon symbols here so I can actually see them. And let's go with this cute little kid one here. Okay, you can see it's there, but it's much too large right now. So I'm going to go into this UV editing panel. It'll take us to this view where I can hit A with my mouse on the left side of the screen and hit S to scale. And this is just going to actually be what's on our photograph here. So if I bring my mouse back to the right side here, hit Z and go back to look dev, left click on look dev, you can see now that this image is actually showing up properly. I'm gonna hit tab to go out of edit mode, and you can see we now have this image onto this. So let's see, so right now it's still perfectly flat. So I'm gonna go to this right panel, click on the gear, it's the modifiers, click on add modifier, and click on solidify. I can move my mouse, solidify. And by default, it adds a really small thickness, and in our case, that's all we really want. So I'm just gonna leave it like that. So I'm gonna rotate around, hit 7 to go into my top view, tab into edit mode. So I'm just gonna add some more geometry to this just so we have more to work with. So I'm gonna hold Control and put my mouse back near the top here, and I'm gonna scroll up until these lines here match the edge that we have. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm gonna go for kind of close to where those match up. So I'm gonna left click and then just left click to lock that in. I'm gonna hold Control, hold my mouse over the side so it's horizontal, and again I'm just gonna scroll my wheel, middle mouse wheel, until we have these pretty similar here. So that looks pretty good to me. Left click, and then one more time down here I'm gonna hold Control, mouse near the side, and I'm gonna bring it up until it's pretty similar here. Actually, maybe that was too much. I'm gonna escape, I'm gonna Control Z to go back, hold Control, scroll wheel up, and this looks more accurate. So I'm gonna left click and then left click again. Tab out and tab back in. Okay, that looks good. Okay, I am gonna tab back, and I'm gonna collapse this panel or collapse this solidify modifier and click to add a new one, and this time I'm going to use a subdivision surface, and I'm gonna change the viewport view up to 2. So that actually gives a little bit more geometry, and by default the way it works, since we have these corners, it's going to bring those in, and I want those rounded corners anyway, so that's good for us. But one thing is that it made our thickness just look a little bit different since it's kind of tapering here. So I might go back and just bump that up a little bit. It might be a little bit thicker than these are in real life, but I kind of like how it looks there. So I'm gonna leave it at that, and again you can play with that thickness amount to be whatever you want. So now, right now it's perfectly flat, and in the real world, nothing's perfectly flat like this. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I'm going to click on this vertex select right here, And also, you know what, we've been working with this view split, so if you have a smaller screen, it might be annoying you. So I'm going to click and go back to this layout view, and I'm going to tab back into edit mode. So you can see I still have these selected. If you hit A twice really fast, it will deselect everything. So let's get to where we're on the same page here, and let's make this not perfectly flat. So I'm going to left click on that point, and if I hit 3, I'll go into my side view here, or my right view. And if you hit G and then Z, you can see I'm pulling this point up. But the problem is it's all by itself. That's really wonky and going to be weird. So I'm going to hit escape on that. But if you hit O, that will do proportional editing. So if I hit G and then Z again, you'll see that I'm bringing other points with it. And you can change which points are being affected. Actually, I'm going to hit escape, and you'll see this a little better if I rotate around. I'm going to hit G and then Z. You can see that those are going proportionally with that. So if I scroll my middle mouse wheel, you'll affect more or less of these. So I'm going to escape that again, actually. Hit 3 to go into my right view. I'm going to do G and Z. Oh, and I missed my Z button. I hit Z. And really, this should be really subtle. So I don't want to go too far. It will look strange, but I'm going to go to maybe about there. Just pretty subtle stuff. I'm going to grab, maybe left click on this one, hit 3. I'm going to do G, Z again. Maybe this one's bowed even more. And you can just keep doing this until you think you get something that's got a little bit of a more interesting look to it. And varying up this, how large your proportional editing is will make a difference too. So if I hit G and Z this time, I'm going to bring the mouse, I'm scrolling up to affect less area. And I'm just going to pull this part maybe back down a bit. So just to give us the more unique, different parts with little, bubbles sticking out. So, just play around with this. I'm going to do a bit more, I think it's going to add some realism if all these parts are, a little bit different. It's curled like it's in the real world, kind of warped. And you don't have to just do it on the Z-axis, but it's kind of nice just to keep things like that. So I'm going to tab out, and it's not having the biggest effect now, but you can see how these are kind of warped, and some of this will probably come across in the final render. It's just a subtle little change to get a little bit more realism. Let's see, scroll around, kind of see. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to save my project, hold Control, hit S. So now we just need to make a bunch of these. So I'm going to make sure I've left clicked on this one. I'm going to hit 7 to go to my top view. And I'm going to hold Shift and hit D. That will duplicate. And for now, I'm just going to hit X to lock it into the X axis. In the end, we're going to move these all around. But just for now, I'm going to do it like this. So how we're going to do it now is in the right panel, we're going to click this little button right here, and that will duplicate this material because we're going to need a new one for our new picture. So once I do that, I can click on this folder button to look, and let's go ahead. Let's get this one. And really at this point, you just need to make a lot of these. So you can either follow along with me, or you can fast forward if you get it. But I'm gonna hit Shift D, X, bring it over, make a new material, click on this folder button, click on that dog, Shift D, X, make a new material, click on this folder. Let's go for this one. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. Shift D, X, new material, click the folder. Let's see, do I have that dog already? Yes, I do. Actually, let's go back. Do these little kids, Shift D, X. And I'm going to stop saying it now because you get the picture. New material. Shift D, X. Okay, I said I stopped, but I did not stop. New material. All right, which ones do I not have done yet? So let's see. So I have not done this cute dog. Shift D, I keep saying it. New material. Don't have that one. These people jumping. And I think that's it, or at least close enough where we can start playing around with this. So now we've got all of our Polaroids done. Just gonna scroll around, kind of zoom in. And if you want to make it a little bit fancier, you could left click on one of these, tab in edit mode, and left click, do G and Z, and make each one of these have a little more individual differences, so they're not all exactly the same. I'm not going to bother in this case doing it, but if you wanted to get a little bit, maybe a hint of realism, and even in the final run you're not going to see a crazy difference, but that's an option. Now we need to add in our table. So I'm going to hold shift, hit A, hover over mesh, and click on plane. I'm going to zoom out here, hold shift and middle mouse to pan, and I'm going to hit S to scale up, left click, S to scale up, and you can actually just keep dragging and it'll keep getting bigger as you drag. It doesn't need to be that big. I'm going to make it maybe about that, zoom out. Yeah, that should be cool. Okay, so now I want to add a material to this, so I'm going to go over to my right panel and the materials, click new, and in this case we're going to need to go into the node editor. So at the top little shading tab, I'm going to click on that, and if I with my mouse at the bottom here hold shift hit A, I'm going to click on the search. I just like to search, start to type in image, hit enter. And now we have an image texture. I'm going to click and drag color into base color here. Click open. And if you downloaded my project files, you go into textures, wood, and then you want this COL. So I'm going to double click on that. So you can see we now have this table base color here. So if I left click on this box, hit shift, hold shift, hit D, bring it down, left click, hold shift middle mouse to move around, and I'm going to click and drag, left click and drag this color into the roughness. And if I click the little folder tab, I can double click on the RGH for the roughness. That's affecting how our shadows work here. Okay, so we need to add in our normal map, so I'm going to hold shift and middle mouse just to move around here. I'm going to left click here, hold shift and hit D to duplicate. I'm going to click on the folder, and this time we want the normal. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to connect this color node to the normal. And this one needs one more node. So I'm going to hold shift, hit A, left click on the search. I'm going to start typing in normal. I'm going to go down to normal map, hit enter or left click on it. And then with this line highlighted, I'm going to click there. And now we have the normal maps just adding some little fake depth for all these little grooves on the table. So I'm actually going to change this a little bit. I'm going to click in the strength here and do 1.5. And I like how that looks a little bit better. And then the table's kind of really reflective, which probably isn't exactly realistic. You may like it. Some of this is personal preference. Some of it depends if you're going for photorealism or not. But I want to alter this a little bit. So back down here, I'm gonna hold shift, hit A, left click. I'm gonna type in brightness, hit enter. And with this one highlighted here, so we're affecting this roughness layer, and the roughness affects the reflection. So I just want to just a little subtle. I'm gonna hit the one arrow, and that's just going to make this a little bit less reflective. It's still pretty reflective, but just that little change there. And while we're at it, let's go through and change some settings here. So in the right panel where there's the camera, I'm going to click on that. And let's check mark ambient occlusion. Let's add in some bloom. Bloom will add in kind of a little glow here. Let's start playing around with the settings a little bit. The threshold is kind of saying which things are going to receive it. I'm going to just hold control, hit Z and undo what I did. Let's see. I forget what each of these do, but you'll see kind of a glow around these. And if these were really bright, you'd see an even bigger glow. It's not necessarily, again, photorealistic, but I think people do like a little bit of bloom. So I'm gonna have it on, but I'm just gonna make it really subtle. You can, again, play with these numbers on your own and see what you like, but I'm just gonna have a little bit and leave it like so. Let's go to subsurface scattering. Actually, we don't need that, but we do need to check screen space reflections. So if I zoom out and turn this off and on, you can see how that's affecting the reflections. You can play with these settings to get, a little bit different results. If our scene had refraction, you check that, but ours doesn't. Let's see if there's anything else that we care about here. In shadows, I'm going to do soft shadows. Again, with our project, we might not notice a ton there, but let's go ahead and check that. And now, if you notice, if I zoom in here, the table is going through our cards here, so that doesn't look very good. So let's go hit 7 to go into our top view. I'm going to left click and drag, and that's going to select everything. But we don't want the table, so I'm going to hold shift and left click on the table until you don't see any highlighting or anything. I'm now going to hit 3 to jump into my side view and scroll in, and the table is right at where that axis is. So I'm going to hit G to move and then Z to keep it on the Z axis. And I'm just going to put it to sit right on there. So let's just scroll around and see how this looks. So there's a little bit of a gap, and it does go upwards because we played around with the shape. So I'm just seeing that it's laying at least pretty close to flat and that no part of the table is going through these. So that looks good to me. I'm going to save. Okay, and right now we're still in our look dev mode, so I want to go and change this to our rendered mode. And while we're at it, let's go in the top and go back to layout. So I'm going to hit Z and left click up on this rendered, and you can see our scene's a lot darker, and it's because we don't have an HDR world lighting yet. So in the right panel, I'm going to left click on that little globe, and you can see here, right now we're using a color, so if I click on that and drag, you can see that's affecting our lighting for the whole scene, but we're going to use an HDR. So I'm going to click there on the little circle, click on environment texture, and click on open. And if you download the project files, go to the HDR folder and double click on this rooftop. So you can see how that is now adding lighting into our scene, and you are seeing it in the 3D viewport. Also, while I'm at it, I still have all of these photographs selected. So I'm going to hit 7 to go my top view, zoom out a little bit, hit G, and I'm just going to drag these over to be more centered on the table or on the wood. And I'll left click to lock that in. So now let's actually A really quickly twice to deselect everything. I'm going to hold shift, hit A. I'm going to go down to a light, and we're going to add a point light. So by default, it will send it right to the center of the world. I'm going to hit G for move and Z to go up. Go to about there, and in this right panel there's a little light bulb. I'm going to click on that, click on the power, and I'm going to type in 2000. Okay, we'll scroll around, and now you can see that this light is affecting our scene. So you can really do this however you want. I think I'm going to use 3 different little point lamps. I'm going to hit 7 to go to my top view, and I kind of think I want one at the top right up here, and hit shift D and go to about, let's see, what do I want? I'm going to put one here, left click, shift D, and put one up here. Again, this is really personal preference. You can play with both how strong each of these lamps are. If I take this up to 4,000, you'll see it gets stronger. I am going to put that back to 2,000. You can play with the placements. You can hit G and Y to move it on the Y axis. Really whatever you think looks good. But I'm going to do something like this. I just think as we move through the scene, it'll be interesting to have that lighting in different ways. So if I scroll through as if kind of like how the camera's going to be animated later, you'll see the lighting will be different in each of those spots. So I think I'm happy with that. Choose something that you're happy with. So now our pictures are kind of laid out in a kind of boring way. They are flush to the table, but we want to, rotate them around. So I'm gonna hit 7 to go to my top view. I'm gonna zoom in and go to this first one. And if we're in our top view and you hit R, it's just automatically only gonna do it around this axis, so you don't have to worry about it accidentally rotating on one of the others. So I'm just gonna make these a little bit more appealing. So I'm gonna left click, and same thing with the move. We're not moving it up and down, we're just moving it from this top view. So I'm just gonna move this over a little bit, and this is kind of, again, just up to you. So I'm gonna left click, hit G, and I'm just gonna create a little bit of variation in, where these things are placed on the table and how they're rotated. You can lay this out however you would like. So I'm just gonna go through, just play around with the placement of each of these. Okay, so I'm still I'm left clicking to select, I'm hitting G to move, left click to lock in that move, right or R to rotate, left click to lock the rotate in, and I'm just continuing to do that throughout all of these photographs. Okay, rotate that. How about I go that way, bring it in. So if I zoom out, kind of scroll around, you can see these are kind of laid out in a more appealing way. So I'm going to go ahead and save again. So now we are ready to add a camera into the scene and animate it. So I'm going to hold Shift and hit A and go down to camera, left click there, hit G, Z, and we're going to bring this camera up. It's kind of small, so I'm going to hit S to scale it. I'm just going to bring that down to about so we have a better idea of where it's pointing. So if I hit 0, I will go into what the camera's looking at. If I hit N, it'll bring up my right panel. If I click on this view button, I can click lock camera to view. So what that means is now if I'm looking through the camera with 0 and I scroll around, my camera actually is moving with this. So I'm going to get the camera into a position that's kind of nice to start things off, maybe about so. And I'm going to go ahead and turn that lock camera to view off. So now if I scroll around, there's the camera. If I hit 0, I go back into that view. So now we're going to animate the camera using some empties. You can animate the camera directly, but it's kind of nice to do it with some other things actually driving the animation. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit F3, which will let me do my search. I think it's the same for the Mac. If not, just look up how you can search for your actions. I'm going to type in snap. I'm going to go snap cursor to active. So that's just going to move my 3D cursor to right where the camera is. So I'm going to hold Shift, hit A, and go down to empty. And this can kind of be up to you, but I am going to go for, actually let's do this arrows. I'll do this arrows one. So this now, I'm going to hit S to scale it and just drag this out a little bit. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to parent this camera to this empty. So let me left click on the camera, hold Shift and left click onto this empty. And I'm going to hit F3 and type in parent. Actually, I'm going to hit escape just so we do the, so you know what the short key is. Hold Control, hit P. That's the actual short key. I'm going to left click on parent here. So now if I left click on this empty here, hit G and X, you will see that the camera is now moving with the empty. We're only actually moving the empty, but since it's a parent of the camera, it's moving with it. So I'm going to hit escape on that, and we're actually going to add in another empty. So I'm going to hold Shift and hit A, and I am going to add in an empty sphere. And I'm going to hit S for scale and bring this one down a little bit. So this time, I want to left click on the camera, shift left click onto the sphere, and we'll hold control, hit P, and make a parent. And so we did the same thing again, but this time we're also going to left click on, make sure you get the correct thing selected, left click on the sphere, hold shift and left click onto the other empty, and we'll hold control, hit P, and hit object. So now if I left click on this first empty again, hit G and X, both the empty sphere and the camera are moving with it. I'm gonna hit escape on that. But if I left click onto the sphere and hit R for rotate, you can see that the camera is going to rotate. So this is just going to allow us to rotate using this empty. The camera will rotate using the empty, and we're going to animate the actual movement with this empty, and it's just going to keep things really clean and easy to work with. I'm going to go ahead and save. So I've got this empty that's going to control the movement selected. You should also. And I'm going to hit 0 to actually look through my camera. And in this right side here, I'm going to go up and click on the item. So this is where we're going to actually hit our animation. So I am going to hover over these location values and hit I, and that's going to add in a keyframe. You'll see a keyframe dot gets added down here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So down here you see now there's a little dot, and that's a keyframe. This is where you kind of want to decide how long your animation is going to be. It will depend on how many pictures you have, how big you made things, and how slowly or quickly you want the camera to move. But let's just try out with these values of just 250 frames. So I'm going to click on this jump to endpoint button, and I am going to drag along, the X? I'm going to drag along the X all the way, just clicking and dragging until I'm at the end. And I'm going to hit I. So now we're going to see if this is well timed or not. So if I hit spacebar, that's going to play the animation. So you can see here, kind of when you're flipping through these pictures, you want to, take time to enjoy them. So this is probably too fast, and we're going to go ahead and change this. So I'm going to hit spacebar, and in this right panel, I'm going to go ahead and click on, in that case, this one that kind of looks like a printer, and this is where we control how long the animation is. So right now it's at 250 frames. Let's go ahead and even go up to like 400. And again, this is kind of depends on what you do and how many pictures you have and how quickly you want to move. But I'm gonna go up to 400. At the bottom here, I'm gonna click and drag this. This is just gonna let us see our whole timeline. Since we made our timeline, originally it was this size. Now to actually see everything, I'm gonna click and drag it. And now you can see all the way from 0 to 400. And down here works like anywhere else. So if I have my mouse down in this timeline, I can hit A quickly twice, and that will deselect everything. And I can left click on this this keyframe, and I can just hit G to move it. And I'm gonna go all the way over to 400 and left click. So now I'm gonna click this left, jump to the beginning, hit spacebar, and see how this looks. So if you really want to, be able to see these pictures, you might go, even slower than this, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just gonna keep moving along and leave it how it is right now. Okay, so we animated the actual movement. So I'm gonna use my scroll wheel and go around so I can left click onto the sphere. I'm gonna hit 0 to go back into my, I don't know what happened there. I'm gonna hit 0 to go back into my camera view. And now with that empty sphere selected, I'm going to hover over the rotation in this right panel and hit I to make a keyframe there. And actually, you know what? I messed up here and I'm not on frame 1. So if you did the same thing I did, I'm gonna hold control and hit Z to undo that. I'm going to click this jump to endpoint, which is really the first frame. And I'm going to go back over here and hit I. So now the keyframe is actually in the correct spot. So now we can start playing around with this really. So let's say, we actually want to change how this very first frame looks. So I'm just going to play around with some of these values and just hit I again to lock in that keyframe. So now you can either hit spacebar to continue along, or you can just click and drag at these numbers. And I'm just going to change the rotation for kind of each picture, not exactly each picture, but I'm gonna jump ahead to here and just give it a little bit of a camera move just to make things more dynamic and more interesting, something like that. Scroll ahead, and I'm just going to keep going through and just playing with these values again, just to make it a little bit more dynamic, a little more interesting. Hit I. Don't forget, once you make your changes, to hit I. I'm going to scrub ahead again, maybe about here. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. If you go too far, your animation will kind of jump and it won't look right. So it should be pretty subtle. It shouldn't be really huge, but just something to, kind of mix up the scene and make it more dynamic. So hit I, jump ahead. I don't want you to have to watch me do this forever, so I'm going to kind of jump ahead. You can be a little bit more particular than I'm being. And I'm just going to keep adding these keyframes. I'll just do like one more. Make it a little bit bigger and maybe like that. Oh, escape on that, hit I. And then now I'm going to jump back, clicking right there, and I'm going to hit spacebar and just see how this looks. So this is kind of a preview of how it's going to look. Again, this is moving kind of too fast. Realistically, you'll want to increase how many frames there are most likely. And probably in the version I end up uploading, I'll kind of slow this down, but you get a picture of how you'd be doing this. So overall, I think that looks pretty good. I think I'll show you one more thing you can do to make it a little bit more interesting. I'm going to hit enter on that. And if you go to the edge of where this picture frame is, I'm going to left click there. Now I have the camera selected. If I jump back here, another thing you can do is if you go to this camera icon, you can actually animate the focal length of the camera also. So if you really wanted to focus in on some picture, you could zoom in. So I'm going to hit I, hovering over that focal length. And now if I scroll ahead along these numbers is how you scroll ahead, I'm just going to bring this focal length in a bit. And again, if you do it too dramatically, it's going to be too quick and it's not going to look right. So I'm going to go like that, hit I, go forward a bit, and I'm going to pull it back. Actually, I'm just going to type in 50 here and then hit I. And so if I jump back to the beginning, hit the space bar, you can see how we're actually zooming in and zooming back out. And again, that doesn't exactly look good for what I consider a final piece, but I'm just showing you the tools for how you can make your scene. So I would definitely slow this down. I would make the difference between the focal length, zoom those keyframes further. So for example, I could just left click on this one, G, move it over. So now this zoom in is happening over, actually zoom out in this case, is happening over a lot longer time period, so it'll be more subtle. So if I jump back, hit spacebar, you can see the zoom in, and this time the zoom out will be more subtle, and you can see how that's working now. So it is kind of bugging me how quickly it's moving, and I don't want to kind of leave you all stranded. So I want to go back, and I'm going to left click on the empty that's actually controlling the movement. And I'm just going to slow this down on camera. I was going to just have you do it on your own, but I want you to see me do this again. So I'm going to go back into this little printer icon, and I'm going to add this from 400. I'm going to go maybe even to like 600. I'm going to hit enter. Down here, I'm going to click and drag to expand out what I can see on my timeline here. Oops. Click and drag that out. I'm going to left click on that, hit G, and move it all the way to 600. So now if I hit 0 to go into my camera, click here to jump to the beginning and hit spacebar, you will see that this is a lot slower. And I also want to go back and change how this zoom works. So I'm going to left click on the camera here. I'm just going to left click on this one, G, move it over. Left click on this first one, hit G, and move it over. just so it's more subtle and not jerky. I still think you should spend some more time doing this and add keyframes throughout to get it exactly how you want. But I just wanted to touch it up a little bit before I was done. I'm gonna jump back to the beginning, hit spacebar, and so everything's happening a lot more slowly now. That camera move right there is a little weird with the rotation. The empty rotation could be altered to be a little different. But again, I'll leave that to you. And since we extended the length of our animation, the ending here doesn't have any camera moves. So I'm going to hit the space bar, scroll around, left click on the rotation, empty. I'm going to hit 0. And so I'm going to go back and just add in a little bit more movement. Not entirely necessary, but just want to show you that this can be a process of fine tuning. You could even go back, and some of these looked pretty abrupt to me, so maybe I actually would go back and delete, left click on this one, hit X, and delete this keyframe altogether. Maybe these are just too close, and I can left click hit G, move that one over. So really it's a process. So I'm gonna go maybe about here, just a slight move there. I'm gonna hold a keyframe here because I want to go all the way to the end and just make sure I'm actually kind of turn back, so we're kind of looking back onto what we already passed to kind of close it up. So I'm gonna hit I, and I'm gonna hit spacebar and see if I'm kind of a little bit happier with that. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have it be such a dramatic zoom right away if I was gonna go back and tweak this. I'd maybe play with some of that rotation more, and even still, I think it's kind of fast. So you could always go back and increase the overall length and move that main keyframe that's driving everything. So I did notice here, if I hit spacebar to stop and if I left click here, I did kind of like how it kind of turns back and kind of looks back at the earlier pictures. So really use your own creative freedom and figure out how you want to do this camera move. So really, we're ready to render this scene out. So I would just make sure you save your scene. So I'm gonna hold Control and hit S to save. And we're just gonna go through and double check our settings here. So I'm gonna click on the printer. And so I have full resolution here. I'm gonna close the dimensions. And I'm gonna focus on the output here. So normally you'd render out each frame as an individual picture, especially when rendering even a single frame could take multiple minutes to even way longer depending on your scene. But one of the great things about Eevee is it's real time or close to real time, so we can actually get away with doing an actual video output. There still would be reasons why you would do an image sequence output, but I'm just going to show you how to export out your video, just a video file that's just ready to go that you could upload to wherever you want. So I'm going to click on this little folder, and this is going to be where it's going to get output to. So I'm going to navigate myself to this tutorial file I've been creating, and I'm just going to call it finished_video_photographs. Something like that. Maybe I had a typo, I'm not sure. I'm going to hit enter twice to accept that. And right here where it says file format, I'm going to change that to FFmpeg video. And then I'm going to click this encoding. And so this Matroska, I don't know exactly how you pronounce that, it's going to be a file format that may work for you, but just to be safe, I'm going to click on that and go for the MP4. I think that's going to have a more likely to work for everybody here. And I'm going to go down under the video settings here and change the medium quality to high quality. You could go up to perceptual lossless and lossless, but you will notice larger file sizes. So I'm just going to put the high quality there, and really we are good. So I'm just going to save again just to keep those changes. And if you go up to render and render animation, click that. I'm just going to scroll out a little bit, and you will see your animation render out in front of you. So at the top left, you're seeing how many frames it's going, and you're seeing how long each is taking. And once this goes through, in our case, or at least in my case, all 600 frames, you will have a completely finished animation saved wherever you save that file. And we're hardly seeing the movement here, but just keep in mind it does ease into the animation. We didn't change any of those settings, so it does start a little slower, but now you can see at frame 22, you're starting to really clearly see we have started our camera move and the animation is working. All right, we're all finished. I went back and I kind of slowed things down and I kind of played with the camera move a little bit. So I definitely advise you to take a little bit more time and thought into exactly how you want the camera to move and what the pace is going to be. But yeah, you can do a lot with this project. You could put these on some clothespins and hang them up and have a blurry background. You can add music to it. You really can just make this project your own. Another good idea is you could add a border around, instead of just being white around the pictures, you could add one of those fun, kind of striped borders or some pattern. So really, feel free to have fun with it and make this project your own, and I'd love to see what you make from it. All right, and if you like this tutorial, please like and subscribe to the channel so I can keep making more content. Thanks.